Bienvenidos y welcome to the Biz Bruja podcast, where reclaiming our powerful intuition, our sacred medicina, embracing our magic and healing ancestral patterns, invoke powerful creations in our own well-being, our lives, familias, community, and our businesses. Remembering that our businesses are so important at this time. I'm the creatrix of this blogcast, the Biz Bruja herself, Vanessa Codorniu, a modern-day bruja, fourth-generation psychic medium, clinical hypnotist, energy healer, and soul biz mentor and coach. An Argentine-American who started reading adults at 16, became a professional intuitive at 22, and now guides creatives, intuitives, healers, and entrepreneurs to break through fears, connect to the practical power of their intuition so they can serve the world powerfully. Hello, everyone. Bienvenidos. I am so happy to be here with someone that I've recently met. I'm still working on reading her book, but I've been so moved to get to know her and to share her work with you. Please, everybody, welcome Atava Garcia Swiecicki. Hey, Atava.
Hi, Vanessa. Thank you for inviting me to be on your show.
Great. I'm so glad you're here. Atava is just... She's so sweet and so kind and so grounded in her work. We just spent a couple of minutes like connecting about what she's doing and what she's working on, and just love your energy. And the name of your business is Ancestral Apothecary, right?
Correct.
Great. And so before we get into this, everyone, I want to share her bio. So Atava Garcia Swiecicki is guided by her dreams and her Mexican, Polish, Hungarian, and Diné ancestors. She received a bachelor's in feminist studies from Stanford University and a master's degree from the indigenous mind programs at Naropa University in Oakland. Atava has studied healing arts extensively for over 30 years and has been mentored by herbalists, curanderas, and traditional knowledge keepers. She works as a clinical herbalist and teacher. She is the founder of the Ancestral Apothecary School of Herbal, Folk, and Indigenous Medicine on, can you help me with the word, Ohlone territory?
Ohlone territory.
Ohlone territory, thank you, in Oakland. And she currently lives in Tiwa Pueblo territory in Albuquerque. Her personal website is ancestralapothecary.com, but we'll share all of that in the notes. Atava, do you come from a family of curanderas, or was it something that you reconnected with at some point in your life and then suddenly started walking this path? How did this unfold for you?
Yeah, thanks for asking. And in prep for this podcast, I listened to some of yours, especially your story. So I know your journey of coming out with your medicina, and I've also had the opportunity to witness and support many people. And I think each path is different. For me, I'd say my parents grew up very assimilated, and so when it came to me, so all of my grandparents, I always like to say, spoke a first language other than English. And then by the time my parents came along, Spanish or Polish was just spoken by the adults, right? And not by the children. But that's also, I feel like that also relates to the cultural things that were lost. So I grew up in the suburbs, and really, I actually never even met a curandera until I was in my 20s, and that was when I read about in the book Doña Enriquetta Contreras, a Zapotec healer from Oaxaca. Beautiful, beautiful, powerful being, still working. She still has her mission to transform the world. But I think I'm someone, when I look back, so I'm almost 54, and when I look back at my life, I think I was always called to curanderismo or herbalism. I really identify first and foremost as an herbalist or traditional healing as a young person, but I had no role models and no context. There weren't, in the 80s and 90s, there weren't curanderismo classes or whatever. It was in communities practiced discreetly or whatever, but yes. It wasn't something. And of course, I think we're close enough in age, like, there wasn't Facebook or IG.
Oh my God, no. And like my mom was doing la limpia de huevo, right? Con el huevo. And she did that like every month for us when there's something, and she was doing el cura, she would do the el empacho and el mal de ojo, right? The evil eye and all that. But it wasn't like you could find someone outside if you had it within your home. And
Yeah.
so I totally, yeah, we didn't have Facebook. And I bet if you ever go to the library, I'm like looking for like brujeria or healing or something, and all I see is like Satanism. I'm like, no,
Yeah. It was a different time, and and there's a reason. And I actually learned about this researching my book, that things had to be discreet and underground and hidden because of persecution.
Yes.
So in my family, I would say the one thing that was still very, very present in both of my parents, my father's Polish American, well, he's now an ancestor, but was their love and their commitment to gardening and to tending the earth. Like my entire life, they always gardened, and always tending to plants, planting flowers and vegetables. And so I really, and I feel like that's actually an essential part, that even though it wasn't named, this is what we do. It's like that consciousness of tending to earth, creating beauty, creating habitat, feeding the birds. My dad built a koi pond. So um, it was really, and this is why I say I was guided by my dreams. It was really different dreams throughout my life and again, nobody in my family was like, listen to your dreams and do this. My father, a little bit, but not directly, but different dreams guided me to different communities and places and people and teachers. And when I was in the early 90s, I went to my first herbal gathering. It was the Northern California Women's Herbal Symposium. I went with my sister, and when I stepped onto that land and just like my eyes opened to this world of herbs, I just felt like I'd come home. I was like, no one ever told me what an herbalist does or why you would use plants for medicine, but it was just a knowing. And through that, I met my first herbal teacher, and at that point, I started becoming very curious, because this gathering was also predominantly white, and a lot of the herbal trainings in California, in Northern California, were predominantly from like a Euro white American perspective. And I was like, well, what did my ancestors do? What did my ancestors do? And I was very close to studying acupuncture because I just wanted further training. But the prayer in my heart was, I want to know the medicine of my ancestors. There is something, I could just feel it. And that's when I met Doña Enriquetta, when I was working at an herbal store. And it was a similar thing. When I met her, I was like, I loved her. I was also kind of, afraid of her in a good way, like someone so powerful. And,
Yes.
all the curanderas are strict, right? They don't let you away or let you get away with shit. Oops, can I say that online?
People who like romanticize. So I love that you just said that, because I feel like, yeah, the youngins, and that's great. Like it's good to be a youngin, but the youngins are very like romanticizing, and I'm like, no. All my elder teachers would be like, be here at 8. You were there 8 or whatever. They will close the door on you.
Exactly.
I mean, strict, like, like you got to do this, and this is the way it's got to be done. So yes, go ahead. So
Yeah. And actually, I think there's even a line in my book where I said, before I met Doña Enriquetta, I had a romanticized version of curanderismo or curanderas. I was like, they do the limpias or healing. But I lived with her for a while in Oaxaca, and I was like 99% hard work, sacrifice, selfless dedication to her community. To people would knock on her door day and night, and I was like, wow, this isn't just something to do. This is like, it's a calling, and it's a commitment, it's a responsibility. So, that really, I was kind of continuing my herbal studies, and then began to weave in, more and more experiences mentoring with different curanderas, curanderos. So that's really how I came to it. So I feel like, a lot of people come to the medicine, or they come back to the medicina like you, where it was in the family. Somehow it got kind of subdued, and then and then they reclaim it. Or else some of the women I interviewed in the book, it was never even subdued. It was just, this is what we do. This is how we take care of ourselves. And I feel like I represent the stream of people who it seemed, quote, lost or not present, but once we're around it, our bodies, our bones, our blood, our soul, our essences know, right? It's familiar. And I will say, because I have, more than half European ancestry, is that when I studied my Polish ancestry, there's actually very similar practices, very similar traditions. And, like in Poland, they do a limpia, like they don't call it that, but they use a potato instead of an egg, or they'll use like forks and knives and fire. And so I think there's this way of like working with the elements of the earth, with the plantitas, with the water, with the fire, with the ground, the dirt, that is just universal, and what, and I think curanderismo has a way, because it hasn't been codified like traditional Chinese medicine, that it still has the freedom to have the magical and the mystical and the emotional and the empathic, parts to it, so it's so I know I got off the how I got to the medicine.
I love it.
That's how I got. And then, just to segue to like how I started teaching was, again, I was like, how come I'm living in California and nobody really knows about like our traditional medicine, about curanderismo that comes from Mexico or, Central Latin America, South America. And yet, California is like almost majority, maybe it is now Latinx. Like, what's happening? And, why isn't this taught in herbal schools? Why isn't it? So it's like, well, I want to create a class, an herbal medicine class, that really teaches herbalism, but through the lens of curanderismo, that, we're not just talking about plants as like this biochemical constituent, which is, I like science, I like learning that, but like, what's the spirit of the plant? What's the history? How have our ancestors used it? What is my relationship to the plant? And how are we going to use it for tea, but also for baño or limpia? So that's when I created the class, the Curanderx Toolkit, which the first version was Curander's Toolkit. Then it evolved through the years to have Curanderx, just to include all of our gender non-conforming and trans folks in my community, our communities. So I was really creating a class that like I had wished had been there for me when I was a young person on the search to reconnect with ancestral medicine. And what I didn't expect was that it would resonate with a lot of people, and a lot of people would be drawn to coming to the class and learning. And so what happened in Oakland is that class really became like an incubator for folks who would come, and a lot of them already had so much rich, medicina in their family tradition, like alive, that it was just like giving them permission to be like, yes, this is yours, you can practice, you have your own don, right? You have your gifts, and we're going to create a community to like bring it, into the world, like out from where it's been hidden, or, kind of put in the corner because of all of the history of persecution and, witch craze and witch hunts, and which was very much alive, or still is in the world. And still, the elders I interviewed who were in their 60s or 70s, like that was a thing. Like they couldn't come out,
Right.
No,
they
could absolutely lose their jobs. They could.
I lost my job in New York City when I was 24. During lunch, I was reading a natal chart. I'm also an astrologer, and which I didn't even claim to the last whatever decade. But at 19, I was reading charts, and I think I was 24, and I was in film. So you would think that film is more cutting edge, the industry more open. It's New York City. And I read a chart during lunch, and it's right in front of me. I drew it out, did all the things. We didn't have these websites that we were doing and downloading everything. And it was just my lunchtime. And my boss was like, I thought you were smart.
Oh, wow.
Now I'm sadly mistaken. And I wanted to point out a couple of things. Like, of course, we in general didn't come out because of persecution. And
also of the reclaiming of what's already there and giving the permission. Something interesting that I found out when I got online many years ago and then started talking to other people. See, in New York City, Latinas of all backgrounds and races still have the flavor. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And it's a lot of it is because there's the West African influence and the African influence. So in Santeria, even though it's so mixed, right, with Catholicism, because it was hidden, the Orishas were hidden behind these saints.
Mhm.
So I would do circles and I would meet with people, different people would come in, but there was still a knowing, even if people were hiding it.
Mhm.
But then I met so many Mexican American from California who are like, oh, we don't know anything but Jesus and the church. So it's interesting. It feels like some of the Latin American population really got like smashed down with the European witch craze, right? From the 400 centuries, like
Mhm.
1400s to 1800s, right? In Europe, and then continued with the
Exactly.
colonization in Latin America. Whereas enslaved peoples from Africa in general, I'm really generalizing, right? But the ones I met from New York, they kept the flavor. They were still lighting the candle. They were like, well, I do go to church, but I'm lighting this for Shango. Well, let me do a little Oshun bath. So it's interesting. Have you ever noticed that? Or have you just stayed in California so you didn't meet like Latinos from other places? Like, what's your experience with that? I don't know.
Yeah,
It just,
I was in California really my entire adult life. I've just 2 years now in New Mexico. So yeah, and there's definitely strong like Afro Latino and African American communities there, so those communities are very alive. The Santeria and the Ifa and all of that. And some of those folks would come to my classes, and but there wasn't, but I would say the predominant students were the ones who there was just like a gap, or something had been broken and lost, and sometimes just in their own lifetimes. Like some people, when they were children, like their abuela would give them the limpia de huevo and all of that, but then they go to college or whatever, and there's all that internalized colonization or whatever. Like we don't, that superstition, we don't do that, but then like coming back to it. And I'm just really compelled to say this one thing is one thing I witnessed, and hopefully it comes across in my book, is that return to these ancestral practices is one of the most profoundly healing and transformative tools that I've seen people with, histories of trauma of all types just really be able to like finally have practices to take care of to tend to ourselves, maybe along with therapy, but it brings us in a different place than therapy, because we could talk about our things, but and I think this is a lot
agreed.
coming out
Yeah.
with a lot of the somatic therapy work, and especially done by BIPOC people, is just recognizing that our trauma is somatic, and I feel like so many, and to heal it there needs to be a somatic shift, right? And I think curanderismo, like I don't know about your experience of limpias, but when I've been in them, or supporting them or giving them, like they're cathartic. I mean, people are screaming and crying and shaking and throwing
Yes.
up, and that's moving the aires, the energy out in a way that like people, some very deep old patterns that have been in maybe someone's lineage for generations can be released. So yeah,
It's
so
absolutely
it's different
important.
than New York, and I hope to make it to New York with my book tour, because I really want
You
to cross
are.
pollinate with. I've been feeling that like there's something for me there.
Yes, there is. And I remember, like, I was so grateful for my Afro-Latina mentors. Like, I studied with somebody who was part of 21 Divisiones, which is like a Dominican path, many santeras. I started to be, and my mom was doing limpias on us like every month. And she would do many different things in the house. And she had the albahaca and she was like growing different herbs, but it was already just part of life. It wasn't seen as something weird or something different. And she used to do something that I don't even remember the name, but if you had an aire and you had like either was it trapped gas and empacho, she was running something down your body I don't know what it's called, but it was like almost like a chalk or something. And when it broke, it was that the aire left, and literally like your stomach pain left. I have that. I don't really have stomach pain, but like 2 weeks ago, I was like, oh my God, necesito sacar este empacho, right? But my mom is not here with us. But it's so interesting as I did the peppermint, I did other things, but I kept thinking, oh my God, I missed that tradition that my mom had, that everybody kind of looks at me like, no, I don't know about that. But yeah, it's so important for us to reconnect. And, I do hypnosis now over 20 years, and there are people who've come in and have said to me, Vanessa, I've been to the doctor. This is what's happening to me. I'm bleeding. I don't have endometriosis. My monthly periods are so bad I can't even work because I'm bleeding half the month, right? I've tried this, I've tried that, I've tried this, I've been to acupuncture, I've meditated, I've cried to the ancestors. And we go into the subconscious mind, release, like, because I do ask questions. I'm like, what happened to you that year that started happening to you? There was a rape. Okay. And we go in and we heal, we release it through hypnosis, but I also use breath work. And I think it was supposed to be 3 sessions, and this was a long one, and she never called back. And when she finally called back, she was like, oh, it stopped. It was over. And also it was some past lives, right? We released some past lives of torture and abuse and colonization. But I mean, we do need these other practices. I always encourage my listeners, my clients, get yourself to therapy, check out things like EMDR, somatic healing modalities, reclaim your practices. That's why I'm so happy to have you here. And tap into your culture, right? And half of my ancestors too are Europeans from different places, right? And then I have indigenous ancestors, and then I also have West African ancestors. Tap into what you feel called to, and really dive deep and allow yourself to integrate and remember and reclaim, like you said, in your heart, in your soul, in your blood, because it's all there for us. And we need these releases. So I love it. What would you say, Atava, for someone who's listening is like, oh my God, I know I have healers in my family, but I feel so cut off. Like, yes, we're going to say, get your book, right? The Curanderx Toolkit. And what would you suggest would be a starting place, just on a practical?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, I say if there's still living relatives who have knowledge, talk to them, record them. Like and what I've noticed, because I've had students in my another program I taught called Sese Mana, which was a 9-month herbal training program. We had an ancestral medicine project, and everyone needed to research about their ancestral a medicine practice from their ancestral lineage. And this was, people from all over the world, ancestors from all continents. But what happened time and time again is, like, they would have an abuelo, abuela, or an elder, a tia, who they thought just maybe knew a little bit, but then once they started asking the questions, it's just like a lot of information, and also and I think it always was healing, because the elders felt seen and respected, and like their knowledge was valuable, because probably a lot of them had been holding on to that, internalized colonization of shame or whatever around medicine. So that's what I say. If there's living elders, talk to them, record them. And if they're not in your family, they may be in your community. And like we said, like, help them weed their garden or carry their groceries, and just build that relationship. And so that's one way. And then the other way, and this is what I did, although not knowingly, but just making a prayer, like talking to your ancestors, making an offering, saying, I want to know, my medicina, like, and then having that as a prayer in your heart, and things will come to you. I mean, that's how it happened to me. And then Doña Enriquetta walks into the store, and my whole life is, changed. And because I do, especially at this time, there are more opportunities to study, like in New Mexico. I don't know if you know, at the University of New Mexico,
Yes.
they have the 2-week curanderismo course, which has been going on for over 20 years. And they bring in all kinds of healers. So, if you don't have a healer, curandera, curandero in your family, you can reach out and find that your maestra and then just know that that is a relationship that you build too. Like one thing I really feel like how this way of learning is different than going to college is a lot of it is about mentorship and apprenticeship. And as the mentees, we are of service. I swept Doña Enriquetta's floor. I carried her groceries. I did all the stuff behind the scenes. And I mean, it wore me out. I was like 30 years younger and I was like exhausted. So
Totally.
it's not like you can just, I mean, yes, we can pay and go to a workshop, but to really get the essence of it's really like, I feel like the ancestors are looking at us like, are you committed? Like, are you committed? Are
Yes.
you going to hold this? Are you going to use this to serve your community? Like, and then things unfold. And I would say also have patience, because I do see this with younger folks. It's like, oh, I want to learn and then like be in practice. It's like, no, it takes time. Like, and the other thing I
Gotta give you some
always
secrets for
say
that.
is work on ourselves, work on myself, work on our own issues, our own traumas, and like work with the medicine on ourselves to see what it's like, and eventually, like I remember when I was, been studying with Doña Enriqueta and also Estela Roman for years, and I was like, how will I know when I'm ready to do a limpia? You know? And Estella's like, well, when people start asking you. And sure enough, like there was, maybe after like 10 years of, apprenticeship, it's just like people were like, oh, Atava, I got in a car accident, can you give me a limpia? I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess, but of course, check in with ourselves. Are we ready? Are we, because that's a big energetic space to hold for somebody. So yeah, I think it's such an interesting time, because I feel like capitalism and white body supremacy and patriarchy is just like acting like a spoiled brat, and like, but at the same time, I really feel like that this ancestral medicine of all people, like in the power of the feminine in all forms and all bodies is really rising.
Yes. Yes.
I personally think it's the antidote. It's like, okay, they can do all their stuff, but we still have this. Like, no one. I have my yerbas in my yard. Like, that's my healthcare plan.
Oh my God. I love that. I love that so much. And I agree with you. And it is, it's like the patriarchy is rising up for its last like hold on, before it crumples. But we do. And I think that there's no, there's a reason why the last 2.5 years while we were in the pandemic, most people were stuck inside and they were actually healing. Like,
Mhm.
as I was sharing with you, I've been online 10 years now, but in the last 3 years, my business tripled. And I saw more and more and more BIPOC, Latinx, and that's why I created the school to support the next generation of healers. That everybody was like, I got to heal my ancestor, got to heal. Everybody knew, everybody's like
Mhm.
intuitively knew. And I think because we're being prepared. And I love what you said. You said you were in an internship or apprenticeship rather for almost 10 years, right? And we're not telling y'all, everybody out there, that you've got to like do it for 10 years, but I just want you to know that, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, repeating information that we see online or repeating information that we see in a book and just reading it to people does not constitute that you're ready to heal. Because I find, right, on TikTok and other spaces, people just read information that somebody else probably took a lifetime to share. And
Mhm.
then they're like, well, I'm a curandera, or I'm a healer. Yes, we have it within us. Allow yourself the space, as Atava said, to heal, to
Mhm.
release your own trauma, to study with one teacher, be really committed, then to go work with someone else if you feel called. Because I think we're creating a lot of insta pacos, insta healers, insta priestesses. We have it within us. That doesn't mean we still need to anchor it into this current reality of what we have, into the current personality and the trauma we've experienced, and then embody it so it can come forth. And it takes a lifetime, right? Like, you've been doing this
Mhm.
30 years. I mean, I didn't really come out as a full-time business till I was 40, right? But I was reading people since I was 16 and professionally since my
Mhm.
20s and hypnosis since my 20s. And it's like, I feel like when the pandemic happened, a lot of healers pulled back to rest. I came in like, bam. I mean, I was like, why? Because my ancestors, my parents had passed, my brother, hello, you trained all your life, like salí, dale, vamos, vamos. And I'm like, oh, but I'm already out here. They're like, no, you need to be really out there. And so everyone's different. Everybody, some people may have worked a lot, needed that rest, some people, but just know that when you see someone like Atava and you see her beautiful Curanderx Toolkit, you see someone like me or other healers that have been around for a little bit. And I know that next generation healers like, oh my God, I can't wait. Everything that you do is guiding you to your own path, your own elderhood, your own space of embodiment, and just be kind to yourselves and take that time.
Yeah, and that can I just add something that I'm sure you agree, but curanderismo is like a daily practice. It's a lifestyle, it's a culture. It's not just like a technique that we learn. So
Thank you.
it's like every one of us, we always have to be tending to ourselves. And there's been many, many times when I've taken breaks because I've had a physical health crisis or someone in my family was ill and dying. Like, it's not like we arrived, and this is something my own mind had to learn, because I felt like healers, they're perfect, they're on a pedestal. It's like, we're just as human. We suffer, we mess up, we get sick. We have crises in our family, so we also have to remember to tend to ourselves and find ways to bring the medicina into our every single day of our lives. It's not just something we do on the weekends and then it just becomes, and I think who we serve just flows naturally. I think when I was younger, I was like, oh, I want all these clients. And it's like, whoa, that's exhausting. Like, that's a lot of space to hold. Like, maybe we just take care of our beloved, our inner circle, our family, our closest friends. And I mean, and that's enough, right? Like,
Yes. Well,
just
that's what it
that
was
we,
for originally. That's really what
exactly,
a curandera did, a bruja did, a healer. I mean, it was usually your family and your community. Um,
exactly, right.
so I love that. So before we close, because I know we could talk forever, and I love everything you've said. And I'm either going to bring you back to talk more about your book in the future, I feel, or to talk about something else, because like I think we have a lot to talk about. Tell me, Atava, what are some of the ancestral patterns you've had to break to be who you are right now or
Oh
transform?
yeah, that's a big question.
I know we have like 5 minutes
Yeah,
left, but
I
anyway,
know.
but
Ancestor, I mean, I feel like for me, and this, it is interesting. And again, I think we've both seen the trajectory. Like when I was interested in healing my ancestors in my early 20s, there wasn't conversation about it in the mainstream. Like I know it was definitely happening in indigenous communities and African American communities, and but in terms of just the common language or the conversation like it is now, it wasn't out. So I think when I was young, I was like, oh, I want to heal my ancestors, and, and now as I'm older, I'm like, that was also a lot to take on. Like we can make the little shifts in our lives. I know when I first started practicing herbalism, I had a series of dreams of just being chased and
wow,
persecuted. I was like, oh yeah, I'm sure
yeah,
somebody in one of my lineages was murdered or jailed or shunned because they were practicing with plants, right? I mean, I just had that feeling. So just coming out in that way and having to face that fear. I feel like for every shift, there's something else I had to face. I mean, I'd say one of the biggest ancestral healings was around my father's lineage, around my Polish side, because I didn't want to claim that side. People who are mixed race, it's and all of the problems about racism and white supremacy and all of that. And but really on this journey to Poland and meeting traditional healers there and learning more about the culture. And actually, the more I learned, I was like, it's actually a lot like Mexican culture, like just how the earth Tonantzin in Mexico became Our Lady of Guadalupe, like in Mexico, in Poland, the earth deity, the Matka Zema, Moist Mother Earth, became like Our Lady of Czestochowa, or any of the millions of different, Virgin Marys there. Like there was just so many more similarities, and also what I was able to do was actually, as I studied the history of Poland and the immigration and literally this time when Poland had been completely colonized and occupied by 3 other nations, and you couldn't speak Polish, I was like, oh, I actually understood my father, I understood his family, and I was able to heal that part of myself and also like accept and claim those ancestors. Like, I really believe we all have to accept and claim all of our ancestors, even the ones we didn't like, even the ones who did bad stuff. Because if we don't face that, if we don't transform that, then it just keeps repeating. So I feel like, I would say that was a really big, and it's all connected. Like, I feel like the medicine that runs through me, I would say my don, it comes from all of my ancestors. It just, because of living in, North America, proximity to Mexico, having access to, traditional healers from there, I was able to develop it in this lens of curanderismo. But if I was, if I had a mentor from Poland, maybe I would be identifying with that lineage, right? I mean, as my healing work, and maybe they'll come. I hope I live long enough to do that. So, so I think it's a continuous process of noticing what parts of traits that we have that we may just think, oh, this is how I am, or this is how my family is. But actually, oh no, this comes from some pattern that I want to change. Like, a pattern that is in my mother's side of the family is depression, and my grandmother was attempted suicide many times, and so I see that in my lineage, and I have to see when that comes up in myself and work with it, right? It's like,
Right,
that's
right.
the other thing of, if you're walking with medicine, like, we have a responsibility to take care of ourselves with the tools that we work with, right? We can't be like, oh, I'm sad and depressed, or this bad thing happened to me, I'm gonna just crumple and watch Netflix and eat a lot of chocolate, which is fine.
Yeah, we can do it for a day or two. Then we're gonna pick up la campanita or an herb, and we're gonna do what we do,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, because
Um,
that's the responsibility, is we have to keep engaging. It's like life comes. I feel like it's almost like I don't like the word combat, but it's like life comes. Okay, well, it hits, knocks us down. Okay, but I can do a baño. I can give myself a limpia. I
yes.
can, if it's bigger than I can tend to, I call one of my friends and say, I need this. I need a circle. I need a ceremony. Um, yeah, I mean, there's so much. I think we could have many conversations.
Yes. So I definitely want you back. I want you back. So where can people find your beautiful book?
Yes.
And if you can repeat your website or your Instagram for us.
Yes. So, my book, The Curanderx Toolkit, Reclaiming Ancestral Latinx Plant Medicine and Rituals for Healing, is published by Heyday Books. So it's HEYDAY books.com. And if people listen to this before the end of August, if you order it from Heyday and use the discount code La Medicina, LA, then separate word medicina, you get a discount. So I would recommend ordering it from the publisher, or going to your small local bookstore asking them to order it, so we're not giving Jeff Bezos more money.
Yes. Yes.
um, I have 2 websites. The school, Ancestral Apothecary School, is ancestralapothecaryschool.com. We will be teaching the Curanderx Toolkit class starting in September, so people can sign up for that. And there's some other class offerings that will be emerging, kind of based on the book and some of the people in it. And my personal site is ancestralapothecary.com. And our Instagram is ancestralapothecary.com. And I'm actually starting a new one called Curanderx Toolkit.
I think I just tagged you on that.
On the Curanderx Toolkit. Yeah, I need to, right now the main one I'm using is the other one, but in the transition that we talked about before, I need to shift to my own account and not just always be associated with the school, because that hopefully will have a new steward when this airs.
I mean, unless you're giving them that Instagram, you could just go into the account that you have and change the name.
Okay. Yeah. Oh no, they'll get it. Yeah.
No, but yeah, you can, but I mean, you don't have to create a new account. you can just go into the one that you have and go in and just change the name to Curanderx Toolkit because you already have the followers. So
Right.
that's a thought. All right, Atava,
Thank you.
me encantó tenerte aquí con nosotros. Gracias por tu
Muchas
medicina. Thank
gracias.
you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Connect your medicina. Check out this beautiful book. I'm going to bring her back because she's wise and she's honest. And thank you, Atava, because I really feel like, I mean, thank you for your sacred work. Thank you for listening to your dreams and following them. I'm inspired by you. You're someone to watch. You're someone to read. And I'm excited for the next phase of evolution for your sacred work in the world. Gracias.
Gracias, de nada.
Bye, everyone.